Hi everyone. Welcome to the WSO2 API Manager community call. This is the second session. We'll wait a few seconds for others to join. Okay, I think we can start. Uh, so, uh, Hi, I'm Pubudu Gunatilaka. I'm a technical lead at WSO2. I'm from API Manager team. So, uh, this is our second session. We initiated this community call to gather all API management enthusiasts in one place in order to have an interactive discussion. So we had our first session on 20th February, and we are hoping to have this session bi-weekly for a duration of 30 minutes. And in the first session, we discussed about upcoming features and update on WSO2 API Manager 3.10 release. And also we discussed on the active development activities we are having in API Manager team. And also we had an open discussion session at the later stage of the community call, and we answered several questions that came from the audience as well. Today's main topic is about how to secure your APIs. So, today's world, the businesses use APIs to connect services and to transfer data. So they export sensitive medical information, financial and personal data for public consumption. So not all data is the same, and you should not protect every data in the same way. So API security is important. For an example use case, if you take maybe you don't care if someone finds out what's in your page, but if they use that the same API to track your location, then you might be more concerned. So that's how API security is important. So let's look at what are the options we have in uh, to secure an API. So basic authentication. So this is the most straightforward method and the easiest one. So with this method, the sender places a username and password into the request header. The username and password encoded in base64. So one thing to note down here is that this is encoded in base64 and not encrypted. So it's very easy to retrieve username and password from basic authentication if you use in plain HTTP. So the one thing you have to use is the HTTPS, so that it will not, so it will secure in HTTPS. So this method does not require cookies or session IDs or login pages or any other such specialty solution. So because it uses the HTTP header itself. So there is no need to do handshakes or any other complex response systems. So I will discuss in O2 scenario as well. So this basic authentication is recommended for securing APIs where you have system-to-system communication that happens in an internal network. So this can be used for an IoT solution like Internet of Things use cases. And one of the drawbacks of this method is that there is no policy on refreshing the user credentials. So if you change your user credentials, then your client applications have to change as well. So that's about the basic authentication. Now let's look at the O2 security mechanism. So I think most of you are familiar with the O2. So in basic authentication, like what we discussed is that we had several issues, like you have to give the user credentials and you cannot renew those, and there are issues with that. So these issues are solved in O2. So O2 or Open Authorization is an open standard for access delegation. It is used for token-based authorization and authentication. And in this approach, the user logs into a system, and that system will then request the authentication, usually in the form of token, and the user will then forward this request to an authentication server, which will either reject or allow this authentication. From here, the token is provided to the user and then to the requester. So hereafter, without the user, the requester can renew the token, or the token can be validated as well until the expiry. So this token has a scope where it defines the limit of where the token can be used. So you cannot use the same token for all the resources of the APIs if it is bound with a particular resource. So these are the some of the advantages when compared in O2 when compared to basic authentication. So once the token is expiring, you can use the refresh token to refresh the token and renew as go on. So so this is fundamentally a much more secure and powerful system than the other approaches. So due to this scope and validity period, and this standard is used by many technology providers such as Google, Facebook, or Twitter, and you name it, everyone has it now. So there are several grants for client application to acquire an access token. So there are grant types such as client credential, authorization code, password grant, NTLM, SAML grant, refresh grant. So these grant can be used based on your use cases. So the password grant type, if you take it, so it is similar to the basic authentication where you use your credential to obtain an access token. So strongest, if we consider the strongest grant type, so authorization code is known as the strongest grant type. And the drawback in this auto option is that your client applications has to implement an access token retrieving, refreshing. So those things the client application or the developer has to develop. So this is somewhat complex for client application. So this is where you have you have other option called API keys. So this is basically use application that are unable to develop an O2 flow. So in this method, a unique generated value is assigned to each first time user. So that signifying that the user is known. So when the user attempts to re-enter the system, this unique key is used to prove that they are the same user as before. So in WSO2 API Manager, we use the JWT token as an API key. And if you compare the other implementation, some may are using opaque token and some are have the consumer key as the of the O2 application as the API key. So this basically depends on the implementation that goes in there. So API key can be sent in a header or a query parameter, but when you are sending it as a query parameter, that's not that is easier to discover for any attacker. So the header approach is the best approach and more secure. So API keys are widely used in the industry, and this has become some sort of a standard due to its simplicity. But this is not a good security measure. But API keys are recommended to use system to system communication. So the one other thing is that API keys can be shared with other systems, but you cannot use basic authentication or your credentials with the other users. But in API keys, this is some value that can be shared with in a way that attackers cannot discover. Okay, now let's look at the other options. So our final option is the mutual SSL. So when we compare the usual one-way SSL authentication where, so the one-way SSL authentication where client verifies the identity of the server. In mutual SSL, the server validates the identity of the client so that both parties trust each other. So in this case, API gateway knows who are the clients that are using the API gateway, and clients know the API gateway beforehand. So everyone knows each other. So this is tightly mostly used in a tight security uh, networks, or the where the securities need to be tightened use cases. So this is basically used in server to server communication as well. Okay, so that's about the mutual SSL. So now you may think, what is the best option to secure your APIs? So this depends on your use case. So when selecting an option among the basic auth or two API keys or mutual SSL, you need to consider a few things, like that is whether you need tight security. Is it the system to system communication, or do you need access delegation, or does the communication between the API gateway and the client happen in an internal network? So based on your situation, you can pick any of the security mechanism discussed. So WSO2 API Manager supports all these mechanisms, so you can try out these and let us know your feedback. So uh, then it will help us to learn from what you have. So that's about how to secure APIs. So now we have moved to open discussion session. So let's see if you have any questions to ask from our API manager team, or if you have anything to get clarify, you can ask now. So let's see.
Hello.
Yes.
So it's regarding micro gateway. So I'm planning to use micro gateway with API manager. So I want to handle the life cycle. So something like, let's say if there is a published API, can I uh, like, can I deprecate it, or can I using the publisher UI? Is it possible?
This is like to, I think, anyone from the microgateway team to answer this. So I think, Idam, you are looking at uh, managing the life cycle of the API that is deployed in microgateway from the publisher, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So this support is not there at the moment. Like so, those are decoupled at the moment, but we are bringing up a feature in later stage. Now we have started the development that is like we are integrating with Kubernetes, where you can like create an API, and then once you deploy an API in publisher, and when you publish the API, in it will create a micro gateway in Kubernetes. So it will deploy a micro gateway for you. So the now you take the toolkit and generate the Balix or jar file and then deploy. But with what we are working at the moment, so it will automate. So if you go to the publish, and if you want to retire or delete the API, that
Mhm.
API micro gateway will not be like, it will delete from Kubernetes. So that feature is coming up. So anyone wants to
Okay.
add anything to it? Yes, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's another question. So if someone has another point, I would like to hear from someone else.
Okay, so if you are looking at
So, Pubudu, I'm actually deploying that one on OpenShift. So I
yes.
have a deployment. So, so the other problem I faced was like with traffic manager. So since I was having two traffic managers in my uh, deployment, I couldn't configure both. to the micro gateway. So simply both URLs didn't
Yes.
support it.
So the
JMS URLs.
yes. So in microgateway with traffic manager for global throttling, I think we have used HTTP, not Thrift. So I think based on the, I think we had discussion previously within the tip. So here the implementation at the moment does not support to like write those information to multiple endpoints. So I think that support has to come in there as well. So
So one alternative for making that work is to use the cloning facility which is available in some of the load balancers. So for example, in Nginx, there's a module, and if you there's a module which makes it possible for you to duplicate the message and distribute to any number of nodes. So for if you put an Nginx between the micro gateway and the traffic manager, so your request will go to the Nginx from the traffic manager, and Nginx will basically split the message, clone and deliver it to both the micro gateways. So there's a module that does that, available in Nginx. So that's one way to achieve it. And the other reason you should be considering is whether you have the right deployment in place. So one key architectural characteristic of the micro gateway is that uh, the need to have a global level throttling should be quite less, in theory. So if, for example, like if you have in an ideal situation, what you should do is have like one gateway per one API. So if you have one gateway per one API, the chances are that that particular gateway can handle all the traffic of that API. And if a single gateway can handle all the traffic of a particular API, you don't really have to rely on a central traffic manager for rate limit. So as you know, we support both local rate limits within the micro gateway and shared rate limiting, which is done through the traffic manager. So the traffic manager is used only in cases where you want a centralized counter of a cluster. That's the use case. Now, in a micro gateway situation, if you have just one gateway handling all the traffic of a given API, then you don't really have to use the traffic manager for rate limiting. You can do the counting in the micro gateway itself using local rate limits.
Okay.
So you have to basically, I think, take a
Uh,
look at the
yeah.
architecture, and if you still need the traffic manager and like all of that high availability, I think the alternative at the moment is to split the message using a load balancer to both nodes.
Okay. So my problem is like, so I'm writing the backend services also in Ballerina. So I will have multiple replicas as per the request count. So because they have some high TPS count. So as per, I'm thinking, I don't know how to configure that, but I'm thinking that if I will need more than one pod in my OpenShift for each and every gateway. That means multiple replicas for micro gateways. So that's what I was thinking, to have a centralized traffic manager, because for a single API, I will have a single micro gateway, but uh, according to the load, the number of micro gateway count will go up. So yeah, so that was the issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
In
So
that case,
yeah, you have to
yeah.
obviously take that into consideration. But like the load wise, like for example, if a given API, let's say, is taking more than 1,000 requests per second kind of a situation,
Mhm.
then only you will have to, for example, bring in another node, right? So
Yeah.
for a single API, the chances of a single API getting that amount of load would be quite less. That load could be distributed across many APIs, which won't be a problem.
Mhm.
So what you have to see is if a given single API takes like more than like let's say 1,000 requests per second. So then only you have to bring in another node. And in that case, yes, you need to use the traffic manager like a central counter.
Yeah,
But
we have an API which has 3000 TPS. So
I see.
that's what I'm worrying about. Like it's already, so they are using an enterprise integrator, but it's already breaking that. So they want
I see.
something which is, yeah, which is in front of that and which can scale. So,
Okay. Okay.
mm. So, but so for the moment they are not, they don't consider about the uh, limit, like a throttling, or some global throttling or throttling at all. So for now we can ignore that traffic manager. But later when if they needs, yeah, I think in later micro gateway versions we will have that, right?
Yes, so I think we know the issue, like so we will work on that. So another one question came from like the Jaeger support for the tracing feature. So I think although we have not advertised it as an experimental feature, it is there. So I think in beta we had several issues. So I think the team will, so the RC one will release maybe today or tomorrow. So I think it should work in that version. So Joan, Pablo, you want to discuss anything about that?
Hi, hello. Yes, I tried on the beta version, but I can't have this working. So I waiting for this feature because we really need it. But okay, if I try in the next beta version or something, I will do it. If you need
Okay.
some information from me, I was analyzing like everything, but I think that I will wait for the next version.
So
Yes,
are
Leon,
you?
also,
Yeah.
yeah. We will also update the GitHub ticket, and I also ping that person who are working on the ticket, so he will update the status, and it should be available in 3.1 RC release.
Okay.
Yeah, and Joan, like you want to share the use case you are working on with this tracing? Like, is there anything you can share with us?
Yes, we will try to have everything on Jaeger in the when the service is called or the API is called, and the API called some microservices or something, and we will try to have all this tracing at Jaeger. So we think that this is a really great feature because it's the best way to have all the tracing when we run some APIs. And we are working with a lot of different kind of APIs and information. So we think that this is great because we are using it on our microservices. But if we can have the tracing from the API manager, that will be great.
Okay. Okay. So
Sorry, maybe if you can tell me when you go gold with this, how we can take the tracing ID to pass to our microservices, the span or something.
Okay. So our team, anyone? So I'm actually not pretty much know about this.
So you want something like the correlation ID that needs to be passed into the backend, right? Yeah, it should be. I mean, it's available in the context, so it's we can add it to a header and send it to your backend. Is it fine, right? I mean, if you can send it in a header, special header, yeah, that's something which should be possible because correlation ID is already generated. It's something that we need to add the head to a header and send it to a backend, like we can do via global sequence. So it will add for every API that automatically in the system, and it will
Great.
send you.
We
Yeah.
can use the activity ID header, the same that correlation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, maybe we can into the Slack channel we can update, put a link for adding how to add a global sequence if you want. So anyone wants to discuss anything about so if you don't
So
yes.
one thing, like for which with the current microgateway version 3.0, so if I want to do this life cycle management, is there any way of doing that, like even with the command line or something like that, so without the UI?
Yes, so I mean, like the micro gateway is typically deployed in a like some kind of a container management system, right? So
Yes.
I remember. So you are right now on OpenShift, right?
Yes.
So OpenShift probably has APIs that can do things like redeployments, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I am so I'm not sure whether you can do like the entire life cycle thing, but in terms of deploying and undeploying, that can be achieved, I guess,
Yes.
by integrating it with the UI. Like basically, so we have lifecycle extension handlers, right, on the publisher. So when you change the lifecycle, there's a particular registry handler that gets a lifecycle extension that gets triggered. So through you can use that as an extension to talk to various endpoints. So one alternative or other one option is to use one of those extensions and talk to the OpenShift APIs to do the deployment and undeployment. So that's one option. However, it doesn't give you the like the entire life cycle. Like for example, status like blocked and all. I'm not sure whether you can support, whether we can support, because when you block an API, it's supposed to return a particular response, like a special response saying the API is blocked. But like things like retiring, so retiring basically means you're taking off the API. That means in technical terms, you're basically undeploying the gateway. So that you can achieve. So you can do publishing and unpublishing kind of things by using the lifecycle extension handler and integrating that with OpenShift APIs. So yeah, that's one option, I guess.
Okay. Another question related to that. So when deploying it, like, so I have, so for the keys, for the certificates, so can I set like for the existing artifacts, existing images, is there a way that I can set the certificate through an environment variable? I just so it's like when I'm doing it, like it's the default certificate is already deployed. Something like if I have a certificate and if I want to
Yeah, so I
use that
think
certificate.
Hi, yes, like for micro gateway, you can like give any customized trusto or a keysto. You need to like add a custom trusto. Is that your requirement?
Yes. So
Yeah. So
I'm just
yeah.
looking at the Docker file and the other stuff, even the generated YAML. But
Yes. Yeah, like the complete, if you look at the complete configuration of the micro gateway, which is a single file, so every parameter can be passed as an environment variable. It is either on Docker or like Kubernetes. Like if you specify any of them as environment variable, it should work. Like the priority is like we give the priority to the like the command line arguments, then the environment variables, then the configuration. So any value in the configuration you can override using environment variables.
So you are talking about that toml file, right? Deployment toml.
Yeah, that has the trusto and the keysto locations. Yes. So you can override those locations using environment variables.
And also, like, if you want to add a, like, maybe you create a certificate, then you create a key store and update the trust store. Then if you want to mount that to a running or the available Docker image, then probably you can use secrets. Now there was an issue when mounting, like when creating secrets with the JKS files and attaching into a pod. So the when starting up, it got corrupted. But as I heard, like it is working in latest OpenShift and Kubernetes version. So probably you can use a secret with the keystore and truststore and then mount that to the pod. And
I tried that, Pubudu, but the problem is the OpenShift version which I'm gonna deploy is little old, so they don't have they are not supporting that secret at all. Like
okay,
Kubernetes secure vault is not supported.
Yeah, then other option is like you can use your base image which have those keystore and truststore which you have created, and then you can use that base image for the micro gateway image creation. Like I think there is a parameter called base image in the toml file docker config, where you can give your own docker image name, so that you can use that and create your own Docker image with the truststore and keystore you have.
Okay. So for Ajit's answer, so I use that Kubernetes deployment copy files in that toml file. So what happened was, after copying it, like if I have some new files I'm replacing it with, so what happened was it's changing the permission. Like let's say, so I wanted to start my container with some additional commands, such as debugging commands. So if I modify the ballerina sh and if I copy that one as well, the copying is the copying is changing the ownership to root. So, and I get some permission denied issues in the container.
So you are adding a config map, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So in the config map, you can give the mode you want, like you can set the permission mode. So,
can I set that in the toml? No, right?
Not in the toml, like okay, like you want to use that maybe if you are using for deployment, like development environment, like then you can use that as a config map and then attach
that's in the YAMLs, right? A separate config map for that, or the config map which already there. I can use one of that and give the permission, right? That's what you're saying.
So because I think the Kubernetes annotations at the moment, I think they don't support the permission, giving a permission value.
Yeah. So I was looking at that place because it's easy to configure, because I don't need to add new config maps. I just can add new Kubernetes deployment copy files. So
yeah, I think it's better to have it in the feature. I think probably we can give this feedback to the Ballerina team and maybe let them to develop this feature.
Lastly is here. Sorry that I was late, and I'm hearing that you guys talking about new feature. I have a question about business process as of now, and I saw that there is a kind of active mail thread that talking about the future implementation of business process in API management. I'm just wondering where we are standing as of now for that feature, and do we have some kind of estimation of when it can be available? Because right now, new users onboarding, and if a customer want to have a kind of authorization or workflow through that new user onboarding, we need to include the BPM or enterprise integrator or identity access management. So basically we need to bring another platform. And I heard that, this is going to be changed. So it's going to be offered as a out of the box solution.
Yes, that feature is currently in progress, but we can't include it to Tree1. So what we are doing is we are removing the dependency of having external BPS or BPMN engine. It's a pluggable, but by default, there's no need. And we are working on that feature where person who has admin, right permission, who can log into the admin dashboard. They can see the list of approvals and they can approve from there. So that feature is currently on progress, but it won't be included in the 3.10. But after that release, we will definitely include that in feature into the next release immediately after 3.10.
Mm-hmm. So basically, can I promise about 3.02 or 3.03? So by the end of the year, maybe?
Yeah, so we haven't planned what version we are going to release after 3.10 release, but definitely the immediate release that followed by the 3.10 release will include that feature.
What about role mapping right now? Or I know that when just-in-time provisioning, let's say when the user onboarding from the external identity provider, is it possible to somehow map and during that process basically assign user to particular role?
So you want to assign after the workflow approval, you want to assign some role by default to the particular user that is getting added to the system. Is that something that you are looking for?
Yes, basically it doesn't need to be included the workflow. I just want to kind of, new user to have, let's say, immediately assign the subscription role or something like that.
Yeah, it should be possible. I believe we have some configuration. I'm not sure it's working at the moment. We have a default sign-up role which can be configured, I believe. If not, it's definitely can be done via extending the workflow executor. But anyway, that's something that's possible. If you want to assign a default role, it's possible.
Okay, so I think we have one feedback, like one question came about integration of APIs. So Harsha, you want to take this?
Yes, so it's a question, it's a topic that need to be discussed about API integration in brief manner. So we will, I will quickly go through that in terms of API integration. It can means different ways. When you're creating API, you might create API which integrate few services which you want to call, and you will expose it as single API like a service chaining, which can be done in the API manager through mediation extensions. But in API integration in broad manner, it means how you can smoothly, how you can expose all of your APIs in a standard manner, which the application programmers can access them in a unified manner. So that's that way application programmers will have a more flexibility on handling and calling the APIs. Let's say you have a legacy systems which acts on SOAP and XML, which works on XML payloads, and some are microservices, some are JSON response. So if you expose these services in these formats, then it will be very hard for a application developer to call and handle every data format from the application side. So in the API integration platform, many organizations need the API integration platform to integrate and expose these services in a unified manner in mostly this in this world in a JSON format. So it will be unified, and any application programmer can handle data in the unified manner. So in the API integration, mostly it means exposing APIs in unified manner, where you can measure the traffic, you can apply the policies by bringing an API gateway and orchestrate the API if you need. Let's say if you have a revenue licensee scheme, you might need to access the user details and the insurance details. And if you have any other services, that API can be exposed as a single API, but it will connect to multiple APIs in the backend and expose. So this can be integrated by the API gateway and exposed as integrated services to the end users. So that's more of like how what you mean by API integration, but that there can be more, I mean, other meanings and other descriptions. Anyone wants to add any more context? You can add it here now.
Yeah, I think it's time to wrap up. Anyone wants to go? Any questions? Or okay, so the next session will be we'll have on 19th March at the same time, like 7:30 a.m. PST. So hope to see you there. So we'll give our like we'll convey the same way we are Slack. And if you have any suggestions, you can fill out this form, and we'll be hosting this recorded session for you want if you want to see it in later stages as well. So that's about it. So thank you very much for joining, and everyone, thank you.
How to link on that form? Sorry,
Yes.
Is there a possibility to type that form in the chat?
Yes.
So we can click on it or share the slide.
Yeah, we'll share this link in the Slack. So I think we already have shared this. We can reshare it again. So anyone wants to go again? Okay, thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.